Buckley. I'm the Academic Liaison Librarian for Culture and Social Sciences, and I have with me Sheila Quaid, who's a Senior Lecturer for Sociology. So thanks very much for coming in today to talk to us about university reading and beyond. So for the first question, why is it important reading in sociology at the university?
For me, reading is important. To quote C.S. Lewis from many years ago, so you know you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered reading when I came as a mature student into education, and it was like a liberation because I found out there were people who thought like me, people who had similar ways of looking at the world to me, and I didn't feel alone when I read, and actually thought going into a library and reading was transformative for me because I had worked in a factory before and I'd gone to a good girls' grammar school, but I was a girl who played truant and didn't succeed there, and therefore went into a manual job. And then I found going into libraries, when I later came into education, sitting in a library and reading, unlike some people's view that it was boring or somehow something that nerds did, I actually found it quite liberating.
So you found it transformed your life?
It transformed my life, reading, yeah. I want to share that with the students that I teach.
Excellent, that's brilliant, yeah. So what are the different ways you would say a student would read at university?
They will read instructions, so they will read a module guide. The second sort of reading is to read media. One of the things that I do in first year courses is to set an assignment where they're asked to collect 4 different types of sources of material, so that they start to learn that reading journalistic media articles is important, but it's different to reading an interpretive theoretical piece.
Yeah.
And so they have to do an assignment where they report back on their media sources and they report back on their academic sources, and they can start to see the difference.
Yeah.
Now, I've noticed that students find it much easier to connect to media sources and journalistic type of material. So I allow that to give them confidence, but then when we move on to the academic sources, I put reading strategies in place. Because I don't think they've been prepared to read in depth. I don't think the national curriculum prepares them to read in depth. And so they come to us and they're asked to read a peer-reviewed journal article and something connected to their issue. And they pick it up, and this is what they do. They realise it's quite dense. There's theoretical words in there that they might not have come across before, and they have the usual human reaction, just push it away and find something easy. So then they go into St Peter's Library and find Introduction to Gender by Marchbank and Leatherby and read chapter 1 of that instead, which is a great chapter, I have to say. But I want them to do both. I want them to read Marchbank and Leatherby, but also read that peer-reviewed journal article. So I ask them to read the material before they come to class, but not to worry if they only pick up a little bit of what's being said. When they come to class, I've picked up this skill over the years. I do a deconstructive strategy, where I've gone through the article and I say, on page 498, what does the author suggest about ... On page 502, try to explain how the author describes. And before you know it, in class they've got a paragraph where I can see it in their faces, this feeling of, oh, I can see what he's saying now. But I've just noticed that students need just a little bit of help. If you don't understand an article straight away, just decode it. Just answer these questions. And I'm not asking you to come up with the answers. I'm asking you to just look at page 498 and tell me what the author says on this topic. And before you know it, they've got a side of A4 of notes. And at the end of the seminar, I'll say, you're not going to leave without writing a little paragraph. And then as time goes on, over the 12 weeks, you're going to bank up those paragraphs. So you've got yourself a resource. What did so-and-so say about it? And then they start to get, you can't use the word annotated bibliography in the first year because they'll go and run off or something. So you just do this instead. And then sort of show them that they've produced an annotated bibliography. And you just, it's the thing that I missed, because I wasn't trained how to read. So I tried to put that into my teaching. And then their work is, it's not just about their work, it's they become so much more involved in their discipline if they can read. I'm really passionately fighting against what I call anti-intellectualism, where people say, why do the academics have to put things in big words? Why can't they make it accessible? But I really believe that you can make very complex issues accessible, but also widen our vocabulary. So one of the things I say to students is, if you come across a word that you've never seen, and you come across a concept that you've never seen, don't go and find the easier book. Make sure you find out what that word is. It's quite easy to do now with Google search. And it's an opportunity to widen your vocabulary. And I said, I just think words are great, because when I learnt big words, I thought, oh, you drop a big word into something, you feel great. And so, what's wrong with big words? Really feel quite passionate about them sharing this joy of reading. And I'm not being rose-tinted glasses about it. I can see that maybe in about a half or just less of students, it's just going over heads, and they do what they need to do to get through. But there's that core of students that you can see that transformation happening when they've read a journal article and really discuss it in meaningful terms, putting across that these things don't just happen, we have to put some work in, and there's a little process that goes with it. And look for the support that you need to do it. But what students tend to do, and I'm sure I was the same, which is if I need support with something, I tend not to do it. And find an easy way to do it. And I could have done better if I'd just embraced the process a little bit more.
It's like that stretching, isn't it? Stretching and challenging. So what would you say is really the role of reading in higher education study?
Knowing the field. Unless you read. We do two things, I think. One is develop knowledge and develop skills. And because I teach a subject that's not known as a vocational subject, I always draw a distinction between the vocational courses, the ones that will give you a direct entry into a profession, like social work and law and pharmacy. And in my mind, everything else is non-vocational, but it gives you a set of transferable skills. And I think reading is something that gives you a set of transferable skills around what I've just said. The knowledge that needs to develop, that's where you get your knowledge. There isn't anywhere else. You know, there isn't anywhere else in a subject like sociology. There isn't another place to go for knowledge. It's reading. You can use media, you can use visual sources, which I do to a huge extent. But in order to interpret those sources, you need to read academic articles, academic works, philosophical works. Where do you develop your knowledge if it's not through reading? I think that's what it, to put it very basically, I think that's what it's for.
And would you say that helps with critical thinking as well as writing in a critical way as well?
Vital to critical thinking. How do you develop a critical view of the world without reading? You can't do it just by listening to documentaries or to the voices in documentaries. That's part of your process. You can't do it by reading the broadsheets. That will inform you about current affairs and how people are interpreting them on a day-to-day basis. But how on earth do you develop critical reading? I don't think you can. Critical thought. And there are different views on critical thinking. But the way I sometimes encapsulate it is this, which is critical thinking that you get from your education is what you're left with when you've left here. I sometimes say this to third year students. When you've left us, and in a couple of years, you've forgotten everything that was ever said in a lecture. You've forgotten everything that was ever said in a seminar. And then one day as a professional, you're presented with a problem. And when you're presented with that problem, you'll have this mindset which knows that you can probably solve this problem in 3, 4 or 5 different ways. And you have to make a critical judgment. And the reading that you've done at university is really going to help you with that skill. That's the way I see it as a transferable skill. And that reading is your tool. There isn't any other way you do it at university level. without reading in depth.
Yeah, that's great. Could you advise students how they might find reading an important part of their professional lives?
Try to identify the sorts of roles that our graduates have gone to over the last 10 years, so they know that we're not just imagining the roles that they'll go to. But I will, for example, tell them that our social scientists have become managers of third sector organisations, charities that are providing support for vulnerable people, that our graduates go on to teach in further education. And in all of those, I would say, as you develop as a professional, you are going to have to read reports. You're going to have to read policies. You're going to have to read research data.
Yes.
You're going to have to interpret. As a policymaker, you are going to have to interpret research data and write your own reports on what you're being given. If you're going to be a decision maker, reading is not something that you're just doing at university. You will be doing it throughout your life. And we're helping you to do it really well here with these strategies. So I just try to really position it as a professional skill.
What do you look for in terms of reading when you're marking students' work?
I'll give you an example of an assignment that's just been submitted, and it's in the third year, and it's a module called Youth, Gender and Cultural Identities. And their first assignment is to do a report on a youth subculture. So it can be something like the goths or mods and rockers from the past, or grime, and they have to write about what constitutes a subculture, what people buy, what they wear, the music they listen to, places that people make. So how that subculture is constituted, and how it's the composition of it, and how it's being constructed in society as a thing. But in order to do that, they have to read media, they have to look at internet material, they have to then also make sure that they're reading 3 of the key theorists of youth subcultures. So I will insist that they're interpreting the work of Dick Hebdige, Stuart Hall, Paul Gilroy. And these are seminal authors, these authors who have produced seminal works on youth subcultures. So this is what I mean by knowing the field. So it's a third year piece of work, it's a relatively small piece of work, but it's third year. So you will be marked down if it's not theorised. So you will not do as well if you haven't included the key authors in this field or the key thinkers in this field and brought their interpretations into your own. So it's a mix. So there needs to be some media, internet, broadsheet, print media. There's another place where you're going to live. It's called the library at St Peter's.
Fantastic.
And that's where you're going to be living for the next 3 years. You don't sleep there, but you're going to be living there. So get used to it, get in there, find out who your support staff are, find out what you need. Everything that you need